Welcome back to the English Hour. Today, I'm excited to have Sophia with me as our guest. Sophia, how are you today?
Hi Jacob, I'm doing great, thank you. I'm thrilled to be here and talk about some exciting topics with you.
Fantastic. Let's dive right in. Many of our listeners want to improve their English skills but feel overwhelmed. What would you say is the best mindset to start with?
That's a great question, Jacob. I think the best mindset is to be patient and consistent. Learning a language takes time, and it's important not to rush or get discouraged by setbacks.
Absolutely, consistency is key. Could you share some practical tips on how to stay motivated when progress feels slow?
Sure, one effective tip is to set small, achievable goals every day, like learning 5 new words or practicing speaking for 10 minutes. Celebrating these little wins keeps motivation high.
I love that approach. Speaking of practice, what are some of your favorite methods to practice speaking English, especially for those who don't have native speakers nearby?
There are many options. Language exchange apps are fantastic. They connect you with native speakers who want to learn your language, so it's a mutual benefit. Also, speaking to yourself in English or recording your voice helps build confidence.
Recording your own voice is something many overlook. How does it help with fluency?
When you listen back, you notice pronunciation mistakes or awkward phrasing you might miss while speaking. This feedback loop is invaluable for improvement.
That makes so much sense. Now, what about vocabulary? What are some effective strategies to expand vocabulary naturally?
Reading is one of the best ways. Books, articles, even subtitles while watching movies. Also, using flashcards with spaced repetition systems helps reinforce new words over time.
Speaking of watching movies, do you think media consumption like TV shows and movies actually helps with language learning?
Definitely, it exposes learners to natural language, slang, intonation, and culture. But it's important to engage actively, try to mimic phrases, write down new expressions, or use subtitles effectively.
Active engagement is crucial. Could you explain how learners can balance between passive listening and active practice?
Passive listening, like background English audio, helps with familiarization. But active practice speaking, writing, repeating is what builds actual skills. A good balance is spending time on both daily.
That's a solid strategy. Let's talk about grammar now. Many learners struggle with grammar rules. How should they approach grammar without feeling overwhelmed?
Focus on the grammar you need most for communication first. Don't try to master everything at once. Learn grammar in context, through sentences and real usage, rather than memorizing isolated rules.
Learning grammar contextually sounds practical. What about common mistakes you see learners make with grammar?
A common mistake is overusing complicated structures too early. It's better to be clear and simple than to confuse listeners with mistakes. Also, verb tenses often confuse learners, so focusing on the most used tenses first helps.
Great advice. Let's switch gears to pronunciation. What are some effective ways to improve pronunciation and reduce an accent?
Listening and mimicking native speakers is key. Also, focusing on individual sounds, practicing with tongue twisters, and recording yourself can improve pronunciation. Working with a tutor for feedback also helps a lot.
Tongue twisters, those are fun. Can you give us a couple of examples?
Sure, try saying, "She sells seashells by the seashore," or "Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers," slowly, then faster. They challenge your mouth muscles and improve clarity.
I'll have to try those. Now, motivation can sometimes dip. How do you recommend learners get back on track when they feel discouraged?
Remember why you started. Revisit your goals and visualize the benefits of fluency. Also, switch up your routine to keep it exciting. Try new topics, apps, or conversation partners.
That's very encouraging. Do you think it's better to focus on one skill at a time or practice all skills simultaneously?
I suggest integrating all skills: listening, speaking, reading, and writing, because they support each other. For example, reading improves vocabulary, which helps speaking.
Integration over isolation, got it. What role does culture play in learning English?
Immense. Understanding cultural contexts helps learners grasp idioms, jokes, and social cues, making communication more natural and effective.
So learning about culture enhances language learning itself?
Exactly. Watching English movies, reading about customs, or chatting with native speakers gives deeper insights.
Speaking of chatting, how important is it to make mistakes during practice?
Mistakes are essential, they're part of learning. The key is to learn from them and not be afraid to speak.
That's so important. Perfectionism can really hold learners back.
Yes, embracing imperfection frees learners to communicate more and improve faster.
Let's talk about learning environments. What kind of environment helps learners succeed?
An environment rich in English input and opportunities to practice is ideal. This could be joining clubs, online groups, or even changing device settings to English.
Little tweaks like changing device language, love that tip. How about technology? What apps or tools do you recommend?
Duolingo for starters, BBC Learning English for structured lessons, Anki for flashcards, and conversation apps like HelloTalk or Tandem.
What about AI tools? Are they helpful?
Absolutely, AI chatbots can simulate conversations anytime. They offer instant feedback and reduce pressure.
That's exciting for learners who lack speaking partners. What's your view on learning English through music or songs?
Songs help with pronunciation, rhythm, and vocabulary. Plus, they're fun and memorable. Just try to listen actively and look up new words.
How can learners keep track of progress?
Keeping a journal or recording your voice weekly can show improvement over time. Also, setting milestones and rewarding yourself helps.
That's motivating. Any tips for learners preparing for English exams?
Practice with past papers, focus on weak areas, and improve your timing. Also, don't neglect speaking practice, it's often overlooked.
Speaking of exams, how can learners reduce anxiety?
Regular practice builds confidence. Also, relaxation techniques and positive visualization before the exam can calm nerves.
That's excellent advice. What about reading? What types of materials are best?
Graded readers are great for learners. Also, simple news articles, blogs, and stories related to your interests keep reading enjoyable.
Finally, if you could give just one piece of advice to all English learners, what would it be?
Be kind to yourself, stay curious, and keep practicing every day, no matter how small the effort.
Wise words to end this part of our conversation. Sophia, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge today.
Thank you, Jacob. It's been a pleasure talking with you and your listeners.
And to our listeners, keep practicing, and we'll catch you in the next episode of the English Hour. Sophia, before we go deeper, I'm curious, how did you start learning English yourself? What was your journey like?
That's a nice question, Jacob. I started learning English in school, but it really clicked for me when I began watching English movies and trying to imitate the actors. I made a lot of mistakes, but it was fun and motivating.
So movies played a big role for you early on. Do you think watching with subtitles is better for learners?
It depends on your level. Beginners can start with subtitles in their native language, then switch to English subtitles. Eventually, try watching without any subtitles to improve listening skills.
Makes sense to gradually reduce reliance on subtitles. What about slang and idioms? They can be really confusing for learners.
Absolutely, idioms are tricky but very useful. I suggest learning them in context. Listen to conversations, songs, or series where they're used naturally. Also, keeping a dedicated idiom notebook can help.
Do you have a favorite idiom you use often?
Yes, break the ice is one of my favorites. It means to start a conversation and make people feel comfortable.
Perfect for our podcast chat. What about English accents? There are so many British, American, Australian. What's your advice on which to focus on?
I recommend focusing on the accent most relevant to your goals, maybe the country you want to visit or work in. But generally, understanding a variety of accents is useful because English is spoken worldwide.
How do you suggest learners get used to different accents?
Listening to podcasts, movies, and YouTube channels from different countries helps. Also, trying to imitate different accents can be a fun exercise.
That sounds challenging but exciting. Switching to writing skills, what advice do you have for learners who want to improve their writing?
Writing regularly is key. Start with journals, emails, or even social media posts in English. Also, reading well, written texts improves your own writing style.
And how about grammar in writing?
Focus on clarity first. Use grammar tools like Grammarly to catch mistakes and learn from corrections, but don't rely on them blindly.
Great tip. Now, many learners feel shy about speaking. How can they overcome that fear?
Remember that everyone makes mistakes, and native speakers appreciate your effort. Practicing with friends, joining language clubs, or even talking to yourself aloud builds confidence.
That's encouraging. What role does body language play in communication?
It's very important. Gestures, facial expressions, and eye contact support what you say and help convey meaning, especially if vocabulary is limited.
So, practicing nonverbal cues is part of language learning too?
Exactly, Jacob. Watching videos and mimicking speakers helps with this.
What about learning vocabulary by themes? Is that effective?
Yes, grouping words by topics like food, travel, or business helps retention, because you can use them together in conversations.
Can you give an example?
Sure, if you learn travel-related words like passport, luggage, customs, and gate, you can easily talk about airport experiences.
That's very practical. What do you think about learning phrasal verbs?
Phrasal verbs are essential but tricky, because they often don't make literal sense. Learning them in sentences and using flashcards helps.
Any phrasal verbs you think are especially useful for beginners?
Look after. Meaning to take care of. Get up. Meaning to wake. Take off. For planes are some basic ones everyone should know.
Fantastic. What about reading news in English? Is it suitable for all learners?
It depends on your level. Simplified news, sites like VOA Learning English or BBC Learning English are great for learners. They help with vocabulary and current affairs.
How can learners build habit and discipline in studying English daily?
Make it part of your routine. Set a specific time each day, even if it's just 15 minutes. Use reminders and track progress to stay motivated.
And how can friends or family support a learner?
By encouraging practice, being patient, and maybe even learning together. A supportive environment makes a huge difference.
Could you share a funny or memorable experience from your English learning journey?
Oh yes, once I confused sheet with a rude word during a conversation, and everyone laughed. It was embarrassing, but I learned to pronounce words more carefully.
That's hilarious. Mistakes like those make the journey memorable.
Exactly, Jacob. They teach you and make the process enjoyable.
Sophia, this has been such an enriching conversation so far. Let's pause here for now. I'm sure our listeners are getting tons of valuable insights.
Thank you, Jacob. I'm happy to share and can't wait to continue whenever you're ready.
Perfect. To everyone listening, keep practicing and stay tuned for more episodes of the English Hour. Sophia, since we touched on learning habits, what do you think about using apps for language learning? Are they effective?
Apps can be very helpful, Jacob. They make learning accessible anytime and often use gamification to keep users motivated. But it's important to combine them with real, life practice.
Do you have any favorite apps you recommend?
Yes, Duolingo is great for beginners, Memrise for vocabulary, and HelloTalk for practicing speaking with native speakers.
How about flashcards? Do they still have a place in modern learning?
Absolutely. Flashcards are a proven method for memorization, especially spaced repetition systems like Anki, which help retain words long-term.
Now, let's talk about cultural aspects. How important is understanding culture when learning a language?
It's very important. Language reflects culture, and knowing cultural nuances helps avoid misunderstandings and communicate more naturally.
Can you give an example of a cultural nuance that might confuse learners?
Sure. For example, in English-speaking countries, people often use small talk to start conversations. Learners who expect direct questions might find this confusing at first.
Small talk, that's an interesting point. How can learners practice small talk effectively?
Practice common topics like weather, hobbies, or recent events. Role playing with friends or tutors can help build confidence.
Speaking of tutors, how can learners choose a good tutor or language partner?
Look for someone patient, encouraging, and preferably a native speaker. Online platforms like italki offer great options.
What's your advice on balancing the four skills: listening, speaking, reading, and writing?
They complement each other, so it's best to practice all regularly. If one skill is weaker, focus more on it, but don't neglect the others.
For learners with limited time, which skill should they prioritize?
Speaking and listening if their goal is communication, but reading and writing are important for exams or professional use.
What do you think about immersion programs or living abroad for language learning?
Immersion is the fastest way to improve, but it can be challenging. Being surrounded by the language forces you to practice every day.
And what if someone can't travel abroad? How can they create immersion at home?
Surround yourself with English media, music, podcasts, TV shows, and try to think or talk to yourself in English as much as possible.
That's practical advice. Now, let's discuss motivation. How can learners keep their motivation high over months or years?
Set clear, achievable goals and celebrate small victories. Also, join communities of learners for support and inspiration.
How about dealing with plateaus or times when progress seems slow?
That's normal. Change your study methods, try new materials, or take short breaks to refresh your mind.
Have you ever experienced a plateau yourself?
Yes, many times. I found that pushing through with fun activities, like watching comedy shows or playing word games, helped me.
Fun is definitely key to sustained learning. What role does humor play in language learning?
Humor makes learning enjoyable and memorable. Understanding jokes also deepens cultural understanding.
Can you share a joke or pun that helped you learn?
Sure. Here's a simple one. Why did the Scarecrow win an award? Because he was outstanding in his field.
That's a classic. Simple jokes like that can make vocabulary stick.
Exactly, Jacob. They also lighten the mood during study sessions.
Switching gears, what do you think about English exams like IELTS or TOEFL?
They're important for academic or immigration purposes. Preparing for them improves all skills, but can be stressful.
What's your best tip for exam preparation?
Practice with real past papers, build a study schedule, and focus on weak areas. Also, simulate exam conditions for practice.
Do you think learning English for exams differs from learning for everyday communication?
Yes, exam English is more formal and structured. Everyday English includes slang, idioms, and informal expressions.
That difference can confuse learners, switching between contexts.
True, but it's useful to know both styles depending on your goals.
Now, let's talk about technology again. What do you think about AI tools for language learning?
AI tools like chatbots and pronunciation apps are great for instant feedback and personalized learning paths.
Any tools you use personally?
I like using AI writing assistants to practice writing and pronunciation apps like Elsa Speak.
Lastly, Sophia, what's one piece of advice you'd give to someone just starting their English journey?
Be patient and persistent. Mistakes are part of learning. Celebrate progress and enjoy the journey.
That's a perfect note to keep in mind. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, Sophia. We'll continue soon with more exciting topics.
Thank you, Jacob. I'm really enjoying our conversation and look forward to diving into more topics soon.
Me too, Sophia. Let's talk next time about how to use English in professional settings, job interviews, emails, presentations. That's something many learners struggle with.
Great idea. We can break down common phrases, etiquette, and tips to sound confident.
Exactly, and maybe also touch on business idioms and formal vocabulary.
Perfect, Jacob. I think that will be very useful for many listeners.
Before we pause today, any quick tips for staying motivated when you feel like giving up?
Yes, remember why you started. Find what you love about the language, whether it's music, culture, travel, and keep that passion alive.
That's inspiring, Sophia. All right, everyone, thanks for tuning in to this episode of the English Hour. We'll be back with more soon.
Looking forward to it. Keep practicing and have fun learning English.
Sophia, speaking of motivation, how do you think setting short-term versus long-term goals impacts a learner's progress?
That's a good question, Jacob. Short-term goals give immediate satisfaction and keep learners motivated daily, while long-term goals provide a bigger vision to work toward.
So ideally, a learner should have both.
Exactly. For example, a short-term goal could be learning 10 new words a day, and a long-term goal might be to hold a 10-minute conversation in English within 3 months.
That's a clear way to track progress. Do you suggest writing down these goals?
Yes, writing them down or using a digital planner helps keep you accountable and lets you celebrate when you achieve them.
Speaking of accountability, how important is having a study buddy or language partner?
Very important. Having someone to practice with keeps you motivated and makes learning more fun. Plus, you get instant feedback.
For people who don't have friends who speak English, how can they find language partners?
There are many online platforms like Tandem, HelloTalk, or conversation exchange websites where you can find partners worldwide.
That's handy. What about joining local language clubs or meetups?
Definitely, meeting face to face adds more natural practice and helps with speaking and listening skills.
How do you recommend learners prepare for speaking sessions to make the most out of them?
Prepare some topics or questions in advance, practice key vocabulary, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. Also, listen actively to your partner.
That's practical advice. What's a common mistake learners make during speaking practice?
Trying to speak too fast or worrying too much about grammar mistakes. It's better to speak slowly and clearly.
Yes, clarity is more important than speed when learning. Now, let's talk about pronunciation. What techniques help learners improve their accent?
Listening and repeating is crucial. Shadowing, where you listen to a sentence and repeat it immediately is very effective.
Shadowing sounds intense. How often should learners practice it?
Even 10-15 minutes daily can make a big difference over time.
Are there specific sounds or groups of sounds learners struggle with?
Yes, sounds like think, ink, or this are tough for many. Practicing tongue placement helps.
Can you explain tongue placement for the sound?
Sure. You place your tongue gently between your upper and lower teeth and blow air out. It feels strange at first, but gets easier.
I'll definitely try that. What about intonation and stress in sentences?
Intonation is the melody of speech. It shows if you're asking a question, making a statement, or showing emotion. Stress highlights important words.
So learning intonation can make speech sound more natural?
Exactly. Watching videos and mimicking native speakers. Intonation helps a lot.
What about linking sounds between words?
Linking makes speech flow naturally. For example, wanta sounds like wanna. Learning these helps with understanding and sounding fluent.
That's interesting. How can learners practice linking?
Listening to conversations and practicing tongue twisters or phrases with common linkings helps.
Let's switch to reading. What kinds of materials do you recommend for learners at different levels?
Beginners can start with children's books and graded readers. Intermediate learners should try short stories and simplified novels. Advanced learners can read newspapers, novels, and academic texts.
How can learners improve reading speed and comprehension?
Practice regularly, use context clues to guess unknown words, and summarize what you read aloud or in writing.
Summarizing sounds like a great way to check understanding.
Yes, it forces you to process and remember information.
What about vocabulary building while reading?
Keep a notebook or digital list of new words, write their meanings, and use them in sentences.
Should learners translate new words into their native language?
It can help initially, but try to think in English over time to build direct associations.
That's a good tip. Now, how about listening skills? What materials do you suggest?
Podcasts, audiobooks, movies, news reports, and songs. The key is variety and gradually increasing difficulty.
How can learners avoid feeling overwhelmed by fast native speech?
Start with slower materials like VOA Learning English, then gradually move to regular speed content.
Are subtitles helpful?
Yes, at first. Use English subtitles, then try to watch without them as you improve.
How important is note taking during listening practice?
Very important. Jotting down keywords or main ideas helps focus and improves retention.
For speaking, how can learners build confidence in real life situations?
Practice with friends, join clubs, or speak to yourself in the mirror. The more you practice, the more confident you become.
How about using English in the workplace?
Learning workplace vocabulary and practicing emails, presentations, and phone calls helps.
Can role playing be a good method here?
Yes, role playing typical scenarios improves fluency and reduces anxiety.
Great advice, Sophia. What about writing emails? Many learners find it challenging.
Use clear, simple sentences. Start with greetings, state your purpose, add necessary details, and close politely.
Are there templates learners can use?
Yes, many websites offer email templates that learners can adapt.
How do you suggest improving formal versus informal writing?
Study examples, practice both styles, and understand the audience and purpose of each.
What tools help with writing improvement?
Grammar checkers, writing apps, and peer feedback.
Do you think journaling helps with writing?
Definitely. Journaling daily improves vocabulary, grammar, and coherence.
Moving back to speaking, how important is storytelling?
Very important. Storytelling practices vocabulary, grammar, and speaking fluency while keeping conversations interesting.
How can learners practice storytelling?
Start with simple stories about your day or past experiences, then gradually add details.
What about using idioms and phrasal verbs in stories?
They make stories richer and sound more natural.
Can you share a short story using a few idioms?
Sure, yesterday, I was feeling under the weather, but I decided to break the ice and join my friends for dinner. At first, I was on thin ice with them, but soon we hit it off and had a great time.
That's perfect. Using idioms like that makes English lively.
Yes, and it helps learners understand and remember them better.
Let's discuss technology a bit more. How do you feel about using social media for English learning?
It's a fantastic tool. You can follow English pages, join groups, watch videos, and interact with native speakers.
Any tips on using social media effectively?
Be selective, follow content that matches your level and interests. Engage by commenting or messaging to practice writing and speaking.
What about challenges or live streams?
Participating in live streams or language challenges creates immersive and interactive experiences.
That sounds engaging. Do you use social media for learning?
Yes, I follow English learning influencers and sometimes join live Q&A sessions.
Excellent. Now, how about using music?
Music is great for learning rhythm, vocabulary, and pronunciation. Singing along improves fluency.
Do you have favorite songs or genres for learners?
Simple pop songs with clear lyrics are best. Songs like Let It Be by the Beatles or Count on Me by Bruno Mars.
Can you suggest activities with songs?
Listen and write down new words, sing along, or translate the lyrics.
Moving on, how about movies and TV shows?
They provide context, cultural insights, and natural language use. Watching with subtitles helps comprehension.
Any shows you recommend for learners?
Sitcoms like Friends or The Office are great due to humor and everyday conversations.
Great picks. What about podcasts?
Podcasts cover every topic imaginable and help improve listening and vocabulary.
How can learners pick the right podcast?
Choose topics you enjoy and match your level. Start with podcasts designed for English learners.
Like
The English We Speak by BBC or ESL Pod.
fantastic resources. Sophia, we're covering so much useful ground. What else should we explore next time?
Maybe common mistakes, tricky grammar points, or how to think in English.
All great ideas. Thanks again for sharing your insights today.
My pleasure, Jacob. Looking forward to continuing soon.
Sophia, since we talked a lot about various resources, what's your advice for learners on managing their study time effectively?
Time management is key, Jacob. I recommend setting a consistent daily routine, even if it's just 20 to 30 minutes of focused practice.
That sounds doable for busy people. How should they structure that time?
Divide it into different skills. 10 minutes for vocabulary, 10 minutes for listening, and 10 minutes for speaking or writing practice.
Does mixing skills daily work better than focusing on just one at a time?
It depends on the learner's goals, but mixing skills can keep learning interesting and balanced.
What about taking breaks? Should learners study for hours without stopping?
Definitely not. Short breaks between study sessions help refresh the brain and improve retention.
Like the Pomodoro technique?
Yes, study for 25 minutes, then take a 5-minute break. Repeat 4 times and then take a longer break.
That's a great tip. How can learners stay motivated during long study periods or when progress seems slow?
Celebrating small wins is important. Every new word learned or conversation held is progress.
Do you recommend tracking progress visually?
Absolutely. Using charts or apps to see improvements keeps motivation high.
Speaking of apps, which language learning apps do you find most effective?
Duolingo and Memrise are great for vocabulary and grammar basics, but Tandem or HelloTalk are better for speaking practice.
What about apps for pronunciation?
Elsa Speak and Speechling provide good feedback on pronunciation.
Are there apps you think learners should avoid or be cautious about?
Apps that focus only on translation, without real practice, can limit progress.
Good point. Now, Sophia, many learners want to improve their English for travel. What phrases or tips do you suggest for travelers?
Learn essential phrases like greetings, directions, ordering food, and asking for help.
Can you give some examples?
Sure. Could you please help me? Where is the nearest bus stop? I'd like to order this, please. How much does it cost?
Simple but very useful. How important is body language when speaking in a foreign country?
Very important. Gestures and facial expressions help communicate when words fail.
Any tips for handling misunderstandings?
Stay calm, use simple words, repeat or rephrase, and use gestures if needed.
Great advice. How about cultural awareness when using English abroad?
Understanding local customs and politeness levels prevents awkward situations.
Like addressing people formally or informally?
Exactly. Some cultures prefer formal titles, others are casual.
Moving to exams, many listeners might be preparing for IELTS or TOEFL. What advice do you have for them?
Practice regularly, focus on each test section, and take mock tests to get familiar with the format.
How important is vocabulary for these exams?
Very important. A wide range of vocabulary helps, especially in writing and speaking sections.
What about time management during the exam?
Allocate your time wisely. Don't spend too long on one question, and leave time to review answers.
Do you recommend studying with a group or tutor for these exams?
Both have benefits. Groups provide peer support. Tutors give personalized feedback.
How can learners overcome test anxiety?
Preparation builds confidence. Practice relaxation techniques like deep breathing before the test.
Excellent tips. Now, let's talk about slang and informal English. How important is it to learn slang?
Knowing slang helps understand native speakers and makes conversations more natural.
But should learners use slang themselves?
Carefully, only with friends or informal settings. In formal situations, it's best to avoid slang.
Can you share a few popular slang expressions?
Sure means great. Hang out means spend time together. Bummer means disappointment. And hit the books means study hard.
Those are fun. How can learners keep up with new slang?
Watching shows, following social media, and talking with native speakers helps.
What about idioms? Are they harder to learn than slang?
They can be, because idioms often don't make literal sense.
Any idioms you think learners should know first?
Yes, idioms like piece of cake, meaning something easy, or break the ice, meaning to start a conversation.
Let's try an exercise. Can you create a short conversation using idioms?
Sure. Hey, do you want to hang out tonight? Sounds good. I need a break from work. It's been a piece of cake all day. But I want to break the ice with new people.
That's great. Now, Sophia, some learners struggle with English grammar tenses. How can they master them?
Practice is key, along with understanding the rules and using them in real sentences.
Any tricks for remembering when to use present perfect versus simple past?
Present perfect is for actions related to now, like experiences. Simple past is for finished actions at a specific time.
Can you give examples?
Present perfect, I have visited London. Simple past, I visited London last year.
Perfect. How about conditional sentences?
Practice the 3 main types: 0, first, and second conditionals, and remember their structure.
Can you briefly explain them?
0 conditional talks about facts. If you heat water, it boils. First conditional is about real future possibilities. If it rains, I will stay home. Second conditional is for imaginary situations. If I won the lottery, I would travel.
That clears up a lot. Now, what about phrasal verbs? They confuse many learners.
Yes, they do. It helps to learn them in groups based on the particle, for example. Get up. Get over. Get along.
Any techniques for memorizing phrasal verbs?
Use flashcards, make sentences, and watch videos where they're used.
How important is it to practice phrasal verbs in context?
Very important. It helps understand meanings and usage.
Sophia, what do you think about the role of culture in language learning?
Culture and language are deeply connected. Understanding culture enriches learning and communication.
Can you give examples where culture affects language use?
For example, humor varies by culture, and some phrases or gestures might be polite in one culture, but rude in another.
How can learners learn about culture effectively?
Reading books, watching films, interacting with native speakers, and traveling if possible.
We're covering a lot, Sophia. Any final thoughts on how learners can enjoy their English journey?
Make learning fun and relevant to your life. Use English in ways you enjoy, like hobbies or entertainment.
That's inspiring advice. I think listeners will appreciate it a lot.
Thanks, Jacob. I'm excited for our next conversation.
Sophia, since we're talking about making learning fun, do you think incorporating games or quizzes helps with language retention?
Absolutely. Games and quizzes make learning interactive and less stressful, which improves memory.
What kinds of games work best for English learners?
Word puzzles, crosswords, language apps with gamified features, and even simple flashcard challenges.
Are there any specific apps or websites you'd recommend for this kind of learning?
Yes, websites like Quizlet and apps like Kahoot are fantastic for quizzes. Also, games like Scrabble or Words with Friends help build vocabulary.
How can learners turn everyday activities into learning opportunities?
Listening to English music, reading subtitles while watching movies, or even labeling items in their home with English words.
That's a clever idea, turning the environment itself into a classroom.
Exactly, it keeps learners immersed and constantly exposed to the language.
What about journaling? Can writing daily journals in English improve skills?
Journaling is great. It improves writing fluency, helps practice grammar, and encourages thinking in English.
For beginners, what kind of journal entries do you suggest?
Start simple, describe your day, your feelings, or things you noticed. Don't worry about mistakes, focus on expressing yourself.
That's reassuring. Sometimes learners get stuck trying to be perfect.
Yes, perfectionism can slow progress. Mistakes are part of learning.
Do you have tips for learners to overcome the fear of making mistakes?
Remember that native speakers also make mistakes, and it's better to speak and learn than to stay silent.
Wise words. Now, let's talk about accent. How important is it to have a native-like accent?
Not very. Clear communication is more important than sounding native.
So, learners should focus on clarity first.
Exactly. Pronunciation that allows others to understand you is the main goal.
How can learners improve pronunciation effectively?
Listen carefully, repeat after native speakers, record themselves, and get feedback.
Are there common pronunciation pitfalls learners should watch for?
Yes, sounds like are tricky for many. Also, word stress and intonation are important.
Can you explain intonation a bit?
Intonation is the rise and fall of your voice when speaking. It changes meaning and emotion in sentences.
Like when asking a question versus making a statement.
Exactly, rising intonation for questions, falling for statements.
That's really helpful. What about idiomatic expressions? Should learners use them to sound more natural?
Yes, but only when they're sure of the meaning and context to avoid misunderstandings.
How can learners learn idioms safely?
Study them in context, ask native speakers, and avoid using them in formal writing.
Moving on, how can technology like AI help learners now?
AI can provide personalized lessons, instant feedback, and conversation practice anytime.
Do you think AI tutors can replace human teachers?
Not completely. Human teachers provide empathy, motivation, and cultural insights AI can't fully replicate yet.
But AI is a great supplement, right?
Definitely. It's an accessible tool that complements traditional learning.
What about watching YouTube channels like ours for learning?
Watching English videos with subtitles is fantastic for listening practice and learning real conversations.
Do you recommend learners shadow speakers on videos?
Yes, shadowing improves pronunciation, rhythm, and confidence.
Can you explain how shadowing works?
You listen to a sentence, then immediately repeat it aloud, mimicking the speaker's tone and pace.
That sounds like a fun challenge. What about reading? Should learners read books or articles?
Both are great. Books for in-depth learning, articles for current language and topics.
How can learners choose the right reading level?
Start with graded readers or simplified books, then gradually move to more advanced material.
Do you have any favorite authors or genres for English learners?
For beginners, children's books are perfect. For intermediate, try young adult fiction.
And for advanced learners?
Novels, news articles, and even scientific journals, depending on interest.
Sophia, how about speaking practice for shy learners?
Start small practice speaking alone, then with friends, and gradually join groups or online conversations.
What if they fear making mistakes or being judged?
Remind them everyone makes mistakes, and that practice builds confidence.
Do you recommend any online communities for speaking practice?
Yes, platforms like italki, Speaky, and conversation exchange groups.
Those are great resources. What about improving listening skills?
Listen daily to English podcasts, music, and movies. Use subtitles at first, then try without.
How can learners train to understand different accents?
Exposure. Listen to speakers from various English-speaking countries.
Does listening speed affect comprehension?
Yes. Start with slower audio, then gradually increase speed.
Any tips for remembering new vocabulary?
Use new words and sentences, practice regularly, and relate them to your own life.
What about using flashcards?
Flashcards are great for review. Apps like Anki are very helpful.
Sophia, do you think learners should focus more on grammar or communication?
Communication first. Grammar can be improved over time.
So fluency over perfection.
Exactly. Being understood is more important than perfect grammar.
This conversation is so valuable, Sophia. What motivates you to teach English?
I love helping people connect and open doors to new opportunities.
That's inspiring. What's the most rewarding part of your work?
Seeing learners gain confidence and achieve their goals.
Sophia, what's one piece of advice you want every learner to remember?
Be patient and persistent. Language learning is a journey, not a race.
Wise words. Let's keep this conversation going. Sophia, this has been such an insightful and inspiring conversation. Thank you for sharing your expertise and tips with us today.
Thank you, Jacob. It's been wonderful to discuss these strategies and encourage learners everywhere to keep going.
To all our listeners, remember that language learning is a journey filled with challenges but also great rewards. Stay consistent, be patient, and most importantly, enjoy the process.
Absolutely. Keep practicing, stay curious, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. They're just stepping stones to success.
We hope you found this episode helpful and motivating. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe to the English Hour for more engaging conversations and learning tips.
And don't forget to leave your questions and comments below. We love hearing from you and supporting your learning journey.
Until next time, keep speaking, keep listening, and keep growing your English skills.
Bye everyone, keep shining and learning every day.
See you in the next episode.